Hi, and welcome to the very first topic that we have on the Rigonomicon.com. And it's going to be about the Sushi Rig. Now, this is just a term that I've heard many times before. So if you're wondering what that is, it's very, very simple. When you're making a sushi roll, you chop it up into pieces and you make multiple little makis or sushi rolls um, out of it. But so what a sushi roll rig is, or a sushi rig is, you're taking up a mesh and you're cutting it into pieces, into logical parts of the body, like you would for a normal rig. And instead of using skin to modify it, you're just parenting these nodes together, and you're creating a very simple rig. And this is actually not far from what a lot of people do. It's actually a very good way of setting up a character so you can understand the shape, and it's very valid even today. Like here, I just opened up a Twitter page on an animator that's working for Disney and making things for like Black Panther and Stranger Things and all that. And I've been following this particular individual because their approach to animation is actually very interesting, and they do things with cubes even, and it looks really great. So because the focus is always the animation, and a sushi rig helps us understand the major moving parts of a character. So it's a good mental exercise, and at the same time, it's a good way to start. Um, okay, so I've prepared a character. Hopefully, in the description, I'll have links to the original assets, which were actually, I'll open up the this again. I went to Blend Swap and I looked around to see if I could find something that was good for a sushi rig, and I found that the Stormtrooper was pretty good. So just know that I combined two two scenes and cleaned it up for this. If that file is not available to you, you can make it yourself by simply going to Blend Swap and to the links in the description. So the first part is the body. I took the First Order Stormtrooper, and I know this is blasphemy to mix the two of them together, but if you look at the original Stormtroopers from the original films, even they had prop issues. If you look at the knee on this one and that one, I mean, it's not even pointing in the right direction. There's all kinds. If you look very carefully, they in each shot wherever you have a real stormtrooper in a in a movie, it's there's some awkward things going, and there's a lot of things that are shifting out of place, and it's not very practical for movement whatsoever. So that also translates to our rig, because when we're going to be cutting it up, we want to make sure that it looks natural and has a place where it can bend clearly. Whereas the First Order seems to have very well defined pieces. And this one's from the creator CaptainRex, obviously a Star Wars fan. So the other piece that I took is from someone named Redshift, who made a really nice original helmet, and I modified it so that it was nice and simple inside of in Maya, and we can break it up into pieces. And there's going to be a lot of little pieces that we can just ignore. Don't worry about the buckles; it's not important for what we're trying to do here. So if you are doing a sushi roll of your own, try to pick something that is easily understood and can be broken up into pieces very easily. So even though I added this other body inside of it and posed it and scaled it so that it's a little bit more natural, um, and this is more typical of what you're going to receive if you're out in the AAA world, or in just making games in general. I don't know if in movies it's the same though, but this pose is quite often the pose that we end up seeing as an initial pose. So I put it in a pose that's very close to reality, or what you would see in the workplace. And the exercise here is to take the stormtrooper armor, the white part. For the most part, they're all white pieces, except for a couple of things that are in black. For the most part, this is easy to understand how to break it apart. So I figured this is the perfect sushi rig, because we're just going to be breaking it up by its individual pieces. Now, in this particular scene, this is, even though this is very particular to my current class, keep in mind this is actually a good lesson for anybody who's using Maya in particular, because during my class, the usual method that is used to cut pieces up wasn't working too well, and all the evidence pointed to the differences in the things that have been going on inside of Maya with normals in respect to normals. So I'll show you the problem. So normally what you do in a sushi rig, and in this case what I would do is I would select the mesh, go into face mode, select everything, separate. What that does is it creates a transform node, and every single poly surface basically, or poly group, Maya calls it a poly surface, but ZBrush would call it a poly group, Max would call it an element. The idea is it breaks it up by faces that are attached together. So if there's a group of faces that are not attached, that would be its own poly surface. So based on how things are welded, this is what Maya figured would be all the parts. So if you go through them, you can see that it's broken it up into multiple objects, individual objects. And life is good, right? You figure now it's just a question of combining them. So for example, I have this piece and this piece. That is what the upper arm should be. So I'm going to combine it. I'll minimize this. So you can see that it created an independent object. Okay, so that's good. Now the problem is here. If you start using, let's say, if I go to translation and I open up the tool setting, you can get this by simply double clicking. So if I close this, double click whatever transform you're in, and it's going to show you basically all the options that are related to that transform tool. Now what we're going to do is we can use the edit pivot. You can do that by just pressing D, or just by pressing that button, and it'll give you a new manipulator, and then now you can move it around, right, like that. And hopefully you've been following along with the other videos. You'll know that the x-axis has to point to the next bone. So you want to do something like this. Oh, wait, before I do that, I'm going to turn off the bake pivot. So I'm just going to remove that. I'll get to that in a second, so don't worry, I'm not skipping something important yet. Well, I'm not going to be skipping anything important. Okay, so see, I just pressed W as a habit, so that's bad because now I'm back to moving the object. So I got to remember to keep using this controller, or else I'm out of edit pivot. And I'm just orientating the pivot so that it points to the elbow as much as possible. A little bit more like that. Oh, it doesn't matter anyways, it's going to break. So and then the other thing is I'm going to make the z-axis point upwards and the y-axis point to the back. And hopefully you've been following the other exercises, you know why we're doing that. Anyhow, so now this is great. Problem is with this is this is a tool mostly for modelers, frankly, because the translate X, translate Y, translate Z is still at 0. Rotations are all 0. This isn't worth anything because if I select another object, it seems to move along to the next object. So if I were to go just to select another object and then go to edit pivot, I've lost it. Whereas if I go back to this guy and go edit pivot, at the very least you've lost the rotation, not necessarily the offset, because a pivot for a mesh, it stores the offset of the translation, but not the orientation. So the thing that I'm doing here with the orientation, that work was lost. All right, so here I'm gonna just realign it really quick. So just a quick note, okay? All objects, for the like every transform that you have, depends if it's a joint or if it's a mesh. You can store information that is kind of almost like hidden, so you can get your values here zeroed out. That's what a freeze transform is. Freeze transform with a mesh freezes the translation and then stores that translation as a pivot value, but you can't do that with a joint. However, a joint can store a rotation offset from its origin. I know it's confusing, but let's just say that when we're going to be talking about this in depth about zeroing out objects so that you can animate from zero always, basically its initial position. When it comes to meshes, you can only kind of do that with position, and with when it comes to joints, you can only do that with rotation. You can't zero out a bone for its translation up until recently. Now, I won't get into this too much. Just know that this is part of the conversation here. If I look at the attributes here for the transform itself, you're going to see that this is a mesh, so you do have those hidden numbers of what's actually happening, because here it says your position is at 0, but clearly you're somewhere else, and that somewhere else is this. Internally, it's storing those values so that the transform attributes are set to 0. But it can't do that for rotation, and that's why when I switched objects, it kind of lost that. It's a temporary thing. But what we want to do is, normally what we do is we go into modify, and we bake it. Let me see if I can find bake pivot. There we go. So if I set this to both position and orientation, normally this would work. And here I'll do it. And you can see that something happened with the lighting. And no, it's not flipped normals. So what's actually happening here is that when I imported this mesh from a Blender file, like the ones I just pointed out before, some of these meshes had like smoothing group kind of information. Like basically the normals were locked so that you could have certain, it works differently in Maya for hard creases and stuff like that. So it's even though I used Maya's freeze transformation tool with the lock normals set to never, it locked the normals. So here I'm going to show you what that means. Let's see if I can remember where it's. So if I go to display, polygons, I want to see the vertex normals. So the first thing that you're going to notice is that the vertex normals are all over the place. But if we undo a bit, see, now they're back to normal. So here's a quick thing. That thing we just did with the bake and all that, you can do it in real time just by adding the bake pivot orientation. See, we came back to that. So when I rotate this, it's going to bake it, and I don't have to do that extra step. So look what happens when I rotate it. The normals are locked to the transform, but the vertices are staying in their place because that's what it's supposed to do. But the normals are seem to be following. So that's because the normals are locked. And I didn't realize this because there's a lot of evidence here that was supposed to show that the normals were not locked. It wasn't until I finally realized that the yellow color, when you're showing it like this way, is and this is important when you're doing a sushi rig, because if you're in Maya and you're having these problems and this tool doesn't work for you, then you're kind of up the creek, right? So I think it's important to look at this and go, okay, there's obviously some things here that we're learning that's going to help us make the sushi rig better, and some gotchas that we're bypassing. So the important thing here would be to unlock the vertices. Let's see if I can remember where it is, but it's, just give me a second. It's a little difficult to find it in here. Normally, you just usually, I think it's actually under mesh display. Yeah, weirdly enough, it's under mesh. So you can do an unlock normals here. Oop, now they're green, like a mesh should be. You may have lost your smoothing. So what you can do is just go and do, let's see here, soften, harden edges, and set an angle like about there, and there. That's good enough for what we're doing here. Ideally, you would go to all the edges and make sure that they're correctly hard or soft. But for now, for what we're doing here, this will be good enough. And this is an issue with importing stuff into Maya. Anyhow, I won't dwell on this anymore. So let's say that like this is still preferable to fix than to leave it with lock normals, and use the component method for rotating things. And I'll show you real quick how that works, what the workflow for that would be. So if you're one of my students and you were doing that before with this mesh that was that had the lock normals, you can just do what I did right now. Or what you can do is, a second, there we go, selecting. Okay, we're back in business. Okay, so I got this mesh here. So let's say I want to take these two pieces and I want to put them together. Let me hit the little Minecraft with a hammer symbol here. Combine. So we've combined it into one solid mesh. And let's say I want to use. I don't want to use the edit pivot thing because it's causing grief. So the method that you could use is to go into component mode, right? Deactivate everything, activate only the this little circle with a dot in it, looks like a Death Star, and then the question mark, and that will allow us to select the object's pivot, and we can offset the pivot as well. So you're gonna have to window select the thing, even though you have the object selected and there's only one per object. It seems like that's how component that's how that works. So if you move it up here, where you're gonna notice is in the channel box. Again, we're not seeing really the translate happening, so that's being already stored into that pivot. But if I go into rotate, now I'm using just W. There's no special tool here, so you're just switching between the different modes. So let's say I want to have the x-axis. I know that the x-axis is pointing in that direction. You could make it so that you can see the local rotation axis, so you know what you're doing. What you're noticing is if I start rotating stuff like this, and let's say I want the z-axis to be the spot where you rotate on the elbow. So if I go like this and then stop it there and go back to object mode, right? The z-axis is where I'm rotating. Now you'll notice that all my rotations are fine, but my position isn't. So this is where you would bake. You'd go to modify. You would go to bake pivot. And then in this case, you don't have to worry about orientation anymore. You just go to position and you go apply, and now your values are back here and out of the let's say the pivot information of the transform. Although it is storing something still. It remembers that that's where the pivot is, but at least the local rotate offset is set to 0. So the real values are up here now, and this is much more valuable to us as riggers, not as modelers. Modelers, they can have that offset; it's not a big deal, and that's why the reset by resetting your or freezing your transformations, it's good. So just a quick note, just before we finish here, for this part with the broken one going off to one that's been cleaned up. So what you would do here, like also if you were to let's see, center pivot, like make it go into center pivot. So this kind of stuff, right now it's not playing ball, but if you were to freeze this, it would be positioned here, and clearly that is not 0, 0, 0 is not its position. So this is the kind of stuff that as riggers, this is not useful to us. We need to make sure that we pull all those values there, and we have all of this data over here, so we can, when we're building a rig, we actually know what coordinates are what. So okay, so let's move on to another file. So I'm going to grab the one where, okay, so another thing, I'm going to open up the correct one with the normals unlocked. Okay, and one thing you may not know is that I also have another Maya open. I'm just going to switch to it real quick, and it has the Unreal Mannequin. Now I'm using the Unreal Mannequin one because I want to make sure that this is all the stuff that I'm showing for rigging is pertinent to people using like doing stuff for film and also for games. And Unreal is a very good engine, and there's a lot of thought behind a lot of these assets. And I imported this in from Unreal, or I exported it out of Unreal, and I brought it in here, and all I did was just make it so that you can see the joints, and change the look of one joint so that it's easier to understand. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab all of these objects that are visible, because there was a couple of nodes that are for IK and stuff like that. We don't really need to have that. So if I go to, I get the local rotation axis. If you don't know where that button is, it's under, uh, it's under, I think, display. There's a transforms one here. Could have sworn. Hang on a second. Anyways, there's a way of showing the local rotation axis. Right now I forgot where it is, because I always end up making a button and forgetting where it is, but I think it might be here. Transform display, here we go. Local rotation axis. And for those of you that are curious how to make a button, what you do is you press Control Shift and you press the thing in the menu, and it will be added to whatever shelf you have. So that's what I usually do. I find it once and then forget about it and just have it up here. So local rotation axis is the thing that I have here, and what that does is it would reveal each object's orientation, directions, axis directions. So, for example, if I look at this upper arm, you can see that the x-axis is pointing to the child node, or to the elbow in this case, and the Z is pointing away from the shoulder as if it was like some sort of horn or something, and the y-axis is pointing to the back. You're going to notice that it's the same thing for this one. And if you ever rotate it, like, you'll see that it's following our rule of the z-axis is the first thing that you animate. So that's great, and the x-axis is reserved for just being able to roll it. And there's plenty of videos beforehand where we've gone through that in detail as to why we do that. The important thing is that we've minimized the Y to avoid issues, and you do that across the entire body. So if you look at the hand, for example, the hand, it's going to bend this way, so that's where the Z axis should be. Like that circle is allowing me to make that motion, which means the Z axis is pointing off this way, right? And in the case of the elbow, the z-axis was pointing that way. And this is important for our sushi rig. We need to make sure our sushi rig, especially because there's going to be a part of it, it's going to be FK, it's important that it follow these rules. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, please take a look at the earlier videos, because that you can lose all of your animation and have to start from scratch. It's very unpleasant when you get Euler flips and all that stuff. So, or gimbal lock or any of that. So here I'm just using the Unreal Mannequin as a point of reference. Now, I haven't gone into how mirroring works. That'll be for another video, but if you're doing a sushi roll, maybe you might want to watch the if you're doing your own sushi rig and you want to actually use it for animation, then I would suggest watching one of the next videos that's coming, that has to do with mirroring, and what directions the axis should point for the mirrored joint. Now the thing is, for now, though, just follow the basic rules, and the other side is going to be a very similar thing, but all pointing in opposite directions, basically. If you want to have like the behavior for mirroring. So for example, if I select both of these and I rotate this way, they have a behavior of like what you would expect in mirrored movement. But for that to happen, the axis, like the nutshell of the video that's coming is basically use this alignment, and then on the mirrored side, you do the exact same thing, except you flip the direction. So if X was pointing to the elbow, you need to make the X point away from the elbow. That's all. That's what a mirror in behavior does. Because you could do a mirror in axis, like you can make it so that the X points that way. Then the Z points again up that way, but right hand rule is going to force you maybe to make the Y axis and not point in the right direction. So anyways, it can get a little messy, but it'll still work. It'll still be fine, and you won't have any issues with gimbal again with that method. It's just that you won't have the behavior like I just showed you. So the next step is also just looking through all these bones and getting a sense of what should point where. So if you're one of my students and you're doing, you're confused about the left side, just show me that you understood this side of the body and that you applied the same logic to the other side of the body in some way, and as long as it makes sense on that level, it's good to go. And if you're somebody who's making their sushi rig at home on their own time, yeah, just move on to the other video for how mirroring works, even though I just explained it, and that will get you where you need to go. Okay, so the last thing I want from the mannequin file is the names. So just for the sake of let's say you have to be consistent with your naming, and it has to be clear. And in this case, if we want to be compatible with, straight out of the box when you export, you want it to be compatible with all the stuff that Unreal has without having to retarget animation and the rigs and all that stuff. One of the best things to do is just follow the rules that we've been setting up for alignment of bones, and then just name them the same. And you don't even have to create another, what Unreal calls a skeleton. Use the one from the mannequin. You're good to go. In fact, within 2 minutes, you could have it running in your you could run the default game, and you could see your character running around if you do that within like minutes. So the other thing that's interesting here is just how they do their numbers. It's a good idea to just stick to some naming convention and not change it. Okay, so we're gonna move on now. So now I loaded up the one with the normals all fixed up and everything. Now we're ready to do this. So very similar to what I was doing before. You grab your mesh. I go to I don't even know what this is called. I just call it the Minecraft table because it looks like that. And it's clearly they took this from 3D Studio Max because that was not in Maya before a long time ago. So I'm gonna select faces here, and I'm going to separate. Now what I'm going to do is, now by doing that, you automatically should be switched to object mode. So now the individual objects are as like what we did before. Only this time we shouldn't have any problems changing the pivots without breaking the normals because I've unlocked it here. So then I just multi-select these two, let's say, and I'm going to combine them. It's going to create a thing. You might want to get into the habit of naming it here. So you go upper arm underscore L. So that's a good one. We need these two. I'm going to combine those. I believe this one is called forearm. There was an era where there was a typo, I remember, in Unreal 3. Glad they fixed that. So forearm underscore L, everything is lowercase so that there's no confusion anymore. In the case of this little piece here, because it's already a polysurface on its own, all you really need to do is to pull it out of the hierarchy here that we have of all the objects, because you're not really combining it with nothing. And if you try that, you will get a polite code 16 where it said, I can't do that. Because you're combining it with, it's already combined. So code 16 meaning the error was 16 inches from the screen. You're the problem. So to get this out of there, since it's parented to this transform node, all you do is press Shift P. Shift P, P for parent. It means it's unparented. You can use the P button to parent things together. You always select the child, then the parent, and then press parent P for parent, and then that'll create your hierarchy. To unparent, it's Shift P. I know I repeat myself, but it's important to do that. So in this case, I'm going to call this guy hand underscore L. All right, now I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but with this little video, you should be able to get a sense of how we break it down. The only thing I will do is I will probably go into a little bit of like this. This is good on its own. This piece also would be, I think in this case, it would be spine 3. So you can just Shift P that one as well too, and then just call it spine underscore 3, I think they call it. Let's consult the other file. So it's up here. Now that's something I never really liked because you're anatomically speaking, the torso does not bend, and actually that's something of an annoyance of mine. To even put that there is kind of a waste, but it is spine 03. So all right, so let's just make sure we do that. spine 0, 3. Put a little padding. Now this piece is the one that might cause you a little bit of trouble. So I'm just going to show you what I would do. From my perspective, it's simple. Everything, including the belt and below, would be for the pelvis. Everything above it would be for the spines. So in the case of this piece that it seems to be all one poly group or one poly surface, you could click on this little button here. It looks like a dotted blue square with a white arrow, and it will isolate the object. So maybe the first thing I would do is go to edge mode, double click here, and keep clicking. Actually, you know what? The easiest way to do this is probably just this. Let me just grab it like this. That's it. Did I get it? Yeah, I got it. So if you go shift, yeah, it's shift right click for the context sensitive thing. And we just want to detach components. So now this thing would be a piece of its own, so I would separate it. Then the other thing is this guy, probably same trick, go and select these faces up here and just go separate. What didn't it like? Oh, right. Code 16. First I should break it. I should detach it. And now I can separate it. So that's it. So for the separation to work, it has to be an entire individual polygroup. So now we have an object that's good for this. So let's see here for this guy, I'll shift P again, and this would be the spine underscore 01. This piece, shift P, pull it out. Spine 0, 2. One of the things you're going to notice is I'm not doing the hierarchy, because when you're doing a sushi rig, you want to get the all the transforms taken care of. You're helping yourself out by naming it at this stage because it's cleaner to work this way. And then this, we're gonna get out of isolate mode and select the pieces that we think should go with it. If you don't want to do these pieces, it's fine. But like, I mean, just for the sake of argument, let's say we grab all this and we say that is going to be the pelvis. So now we can combine them, and now we have a pelvis. Okay. And then later on, what we're going to do is we're going to just link them, parent them together in the right order, and that's that. Okay, so what I would do at this point, once you've finished doing all these pieces, including the head's easy here. Like, take a look. What you can do is you go like this, select it all here, and then minus selection, everything else down here. Make sure you don't have anything selected. And then you go combine. Boop, you got the head. There's head. Okay. So anyways, so at this point, what I normally do is I go File, Save Scene As, and I put, usually I create a work in progress folder. And so you can see I've been doing that kind of stuff. So here we're going to call it work in progress 3. That's a good practice. It's always good to, when you get to a certain point, just save it in case something goes wrong. And that way you can always go back to a previous state where nothing's, like, you can keep going properly. It never hurts to have lots and lots of work in progress files. Worst case scenario, just delete them at some point because they're all labeled work in progress. So like the main files go into the main folders, and that's that. Nice and easy. Okay, so let's grab this guy now. So now we don't need to use the component mode to do this because that is a really sucky workflow and it's difficult to see what's going on. So that's kind of the reason why I wanted to use oh, by the way, depending on which version of Maya you have, when you combine things, it might center the pivot. And the version I have is 2024.2 with the patches. So it always puts it at 0. And I also noticed that in my window, I have tools like the 0 pivot, which someone with a default 2024 setup apparently doesn't have. So 0 pivot is actually kind of handy because it's kind of like what I would expect a freeze transform to do, which is put everything to 0, and that way my pivot is in the correct, it's got correct values. But anyways, or my translate has correct values, but that's not there for everybody. But we don't need to worry about that right now. So the important thing here is we've got translate, and we know that the pivot's over here now. And the nice thing is everything's cleaned up. There's no hidden values inside of it or anything like that. So we're not messing around with that kind of stuff. And the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up I double clicked on the transform so I could see what's going on. We're not going to bake pivot orientation on the fly because we're going to have to bake anyways for translation. You'll see in a moment. So now all I'm going to do is either press D as in duplicate, but it's not duplicate. But anyways, that's the shortcut is a D, like duck or dog, and or you can just click on that and then move this thing up here. Now, one of the reasons why I like using this instead of the components is because look how clear the this manipulator is, or this gizmo. Like I can see very clearly where it's being put. Okay, so now I'm gonna make it so that it goes like that, and I just try to avoid the urge to press W or R to switch. You have everything all in one. If you do that, you'll end up out of pivot mode. This is why I'm keeping this open so that I can see clearly that I am doing it right. You'll notice that no rotation values or translate values are happening. This is, from what I understand, this is mostly like what we call in other softwares a working pivot for modelers, so they can move things around quickly without actually affecting the pivot and having to reset Xform or to freeze transforms. This allows you to do all kinds of manipulations without messing with the actual pivot. But we're doing the rigging, so we need the actual pivot. And now that's pointing in the right direction, but I want the z-axis to point that way. Another way of looking at it is just look at where the blue circle is. Like if you were to rotate this character, like if you were to rotate this body part, I mean, this is where you'd want the z to be. Now there's debate like this in this particular instance, having a z out or a y out they're both kind of valid. It's just that in the case of a forearm, it's clear cut that it would be a Z out pointing that way, like the same as this. So because it's going to be a child of this node, you don't want to have too many changes from one object to another. Even though on the hand you're going to be turning 90 degrees on, but it's on the x-axis, so it's fine. And this would also be an x-axis rotation. It's best to always be as close to the parent as possible whenever possible without breaking the rule. So in this case, because the arm doesn't have a clear, first thing that you would animate, was it the lifting the arms or doing a walk cycle where they're walking forward? It's up to you. So in the case of this one, it's a little bit, it's generally accepted that the Z would point up so that it's similar to the forearm, and that goes back to what we're trying to do here, which is avoid gimbal lock and Euler issues. By having something that's closer to the parent, you're going to avoid some of those issues. So might as well. So it's generally the more accepted z-axis for something that has no clear primary axis, not like a finger. A finger clearly bends in one direction more than anything else, and the same thing for an elbow or a knee. But elbow, a shoulder is a little bit different. Okay, so enough yapping. I'm gonna stop it there. So like in the sense of the conversation. So I'm gonna let's say this is what I want. All you'd have to do is go into modify bake pivot with the options. So it opens up, and now in this case, I would use both. And let's see what values pop up here. Good. I know it looks like a lot of junk, but this junk is what we want because we want to have actual values to be able to animate later. We will have methods to zero them out, but first, this is a real pivot. That means that regardless if I'm in edit pivot mode or not, it will always have like everything is aligned correctly. So Z would do this, and it's fine. I select another object, I don't lose it. This is a real, these are real values that are being stored. Okay, so if I go to this guy and do the same thing, bring that up there. Now I'm just gonna eyeball it real quick. Oops. So we're okay. Make that point. X-axis is always first one to go. And we can write tools later that can help us make it so that the x-axis points exactly to the next joint. Later we can clean that up. In the meantime, we're just going to set this up so that the z points outward like that. The x is pointing to the hand, and the y-axis is generally pointing in that direction. Now that we're done, we go apply, and let's just test it. This is the z-axis. This is the first thing you would animate for an elbow. That is exactly what we want. And we still have the ability to roll, even though in this case the roll is important for twist bones, but not necessarily for anatomy here. Like there's not a lot of rolling when it has to do with when you're dealing with your radius and your ulna bone. But the radius and ulna does twist, so later when we're making our twist bones, we'll make sure that this stay like the top part doesn't move, and then the bottom part, because of the radius ulna twisting, that's what gives us the ability to roll our wrists in real life. So we're going to need to create something that can allow that twisting action to happen for the skinning and for, anyways, that's for much later. What's important here is if you were done with everything, you'd do shift, you'd select these two in that order. So you'd select the child node first, then shift select the parent, and then I would press P as in parent. And now we have ourselves the beginning of a rig. And the rest is more of the same. Like honestly, and these little pieces, don't worry about them. I wouldn't worry about it if you're just trying to get your feet wet. There's a couple of things that you might want to consider for this rig. Like we already talked about how to split the pelvis from the upper body and all that stuff. Down here, I think it's pretty straightforward. Like you would put those two pieces together to make the calf. The only one that's a little bit awkward is the kneecap thing. For the kneecap armor, I would, for the sake of the sushi rig, I would I would connect it to the calf. Think of it like a big boot with with a flap that sticks out. That should be more than enough. And frankly, you could put it with a thigh as well, and it would still be okay because your point of pivot, as long as it's exactly there, shouldn't interfere. And in a real rig, you'd have the kneecap armor piece with its own bone that's kind of like an average between the two type of deal. And yeah, so anyways, there's, for the most part, it's pretty straightforward to get this character going. Always using the like whenever you're stuck, just go back to the Unreal Mannequin, take a good look at it. There's this exercise is very good to really get a sense of which directions the pivots should be pointing in, and where you would start placing your pivots. And this is the first time you're going to be placing pivots, so you're going to see a little bit what happens when you put a pivot in a specific place. And then later we'll get into more detail. I'll go over the how skinning works, and like always, the calculations for skinning and all that will be included in that little video, and I will go over what the limitations for skinning are, and how to avoid issues, and how you should potentially cut your mesh, so that you can get nice pointy elbows that don't look like round macaroni ones. So they're nice and pointy, and they could poke someone's eye out. That's what you're aiming for. You want the masses to feel like when you're rotating an arm, for example, you want to make it feel like the mass is being preserved. Same thing with the knees. This is a tough one. It's a long story. How many things I've worked on for the knee, believe it or not, because in a lot of video games, when a character crouches, you can see basically the knee collapsing on itself and the calf going into the thigh in a lot of games. So I put a lot of thought into how to avoid those kind of scenarios, and you see that in movies too. It's like they're not immune to it, simply because they have more polygons. They're still using, in a lot of cases, they're still using skinning just like everybody else. It's just that maybe they're using dual quaternion. They think they're immune to it. They're not. So there's a lot of issues that have to do with dual quaternion skinning as well. So in the end, I will show you some of the things that I found work the best for skinning, But the next topic will be mirroring joints. All right, I think that covers everything.